Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of I Bought a Watch. So today we're going to be looking at this piece right here. Before I get on with the review, just want to say a massive thank you for hitting 500 subscribers, and I do have an active giveaway at the moment where you can go and pick up the Casio or Cadison I'm giving away in the link below. Now onto this watch. This was given to me by Jason the Watch Guy. He's also done a full and comprehensive review, and I'd highly recommend go checking that out if you're thinking of buying one of these. As always, I've got a link for where you can go pick one of these up in the description below. That will be an affiliate link that basically adds no cost to the watch, but I get a little bit of money and it helps me buy more watches for this channel. Now, the review is going to be structured as usual. I'll do a bit of history on the piece that this is homaging, go through some of the specs, and then go through some of my criticisms of this watch, as personally that's what I think is most important as a buyer. So without further ado, let's get on to the review. Here we have the Pagani design reference number PD1658, which is a homage of the rather obscure Rolex Label Noir Milgauss. Now, this is a homage that no one really asked for. I'm sure people out there would have much preferred a Rolex Milgauss or a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, but for whatever reason, Pagani Design has decided that this is the watch that they want to homage, so let me go through some of the history. So the Rolex Milgauss by Atelier Noir was dubbed the first Rolex with a tourbillon, or more specifically, it's the first Rolex to be modified with a tourbillon escapement. So, Label Noir is a mod shop that's based in Switzerland. They also have a few shops in France, and they do a range of primarily Rolexes where they modify them to a rather monochrome styling. So this particular movement, they started with the Rolex caliber 3131, which is the caliber found in the Rolex Milgauss. They removed 51 of the components, modified 2, and added a remaining 94. This changed the watch frequency from 28,800 to 21,600 and no doubt destroyed the anti-magnetism that is so synonymous with the Milgauss. But hey, I mean, they've created a Rolex with a tourbillon, and if any Rolex was gonna have a tourbillon, it was gonna be the Milgauss with that flashy lightning bolt seconds hand. Now, you can go pick this one up in a range of different colorways. Pagani Design offer it in blue, black, black and gold, and all black. They have a range of PVD coated cases and bracelets. Now, rather strangely, the actual Label Noir does have a black case and bracelet. Now, I'm sure Label Noir hasn't got a simple PVD coating and it is more like space dust or something. But what I find peculiar is that if you wanted a pure homage of this grey dial and a black PVD coated case and bracelet, you would have to buy 2 Pagani Design watches and do a little bit of watch modding. I'm not really sure what Pagani Design was doing. It seems like Pagani Design have done all the groundwork, but somehow failed to put all the elements together. This is quite similar to all those people asking for a Oyster Perpetual and Milgauss homage. They have all the pieces, but I'm just not sure why they're not bringing all the puzzle pieces together. Anyway, let's get on to some specifications. Alright, well, that all being said, I'm going to talk about this more at the end, but I think I do prefer the steel case. I'm not such a fan of the PVD coating on watches. That being said, I've never actually come face to face with one, so that may all change. I'm hopefully getting one on the channel soonish. But let's have a look at what I've got in front of me. Just look at it. This dial is something special. It's something that will catch people's eye and something that gives me a smile every time I look down at that open heart. Now, getting on to the specifications. Diameter-wise, we have a diameter of 41 millimeters. The lug-to-lug is 50 millimeters with a lug width of 21 millimeters. That's a bit peculiar. It means that it's not quite the strap monster that I hoped for. And the thickness here is 13 millimeters. It's fairly chunky, and I think that's largely due to the movement that we have on this piece. Let me just pop the bracelet here so I can just get a better hold on this watch and have a closer look in on this dial. Now, if you're familiar with the Rolex Milgauss, you'll be very familiar with a lot of aspects here. The handset and iconic seconds hand immediately jumps out at you. But it's the aspects that aren't Rolex Milgauss which jump out at you even more, in my opinion. The massive open heart at the 6 o'clock and this monochrome color scheme really give this piece an iconic look. Now, of course, that's no credit to Pagani and all credit to Label Noir. It is a bit flashy, but it's definitely eye-catching. An aspect of this piece that I really like are the black inlays in those applied indices and hour hands. It's something so simple, but really brings this dial together. The flat grey dial has the Pagani Design logo and Pagani Design Automatic printed below the 12 o'clock, and around the edge is a minute track which has minute and half-minute intervals printed in white and 5-minute intervals printed in black. Now, these provide the important job of helping you read the time when the minute or hour hand are anywhere near the bottom half of that dial. And this is, of course, due to that rather impressive open heart complication. This is really my first experience with a open heart, and I must say it really is something to witness firsthand. Videos don't really do it justice. I've always steered clear and thought they were a bit gimmicky and ran the risk of looking incredibly cheap. But I must say, in hand, this isn't really the case. And although still arguably a gimmick, I must say I have found myself staring into that open heart and just appreciating the mechanical engineering that goes into creating a clockwork movement. Moving around onto the case and finishing. So as you can see, it has a high polished fixed bezel and has a nice signed crown with that Pagani Design logo. As you can see, this case is modeled after the Rolex Oyster case that is appropriate considering it is modeling a Milgauss. As you can see, the watch is finished in a high polish, which makes the watch look lovely, but it is prone to scratching. Moving on to the bracelet, we have solid fixed end links. These fit beautifully snug in between that 21mm lug width, which is great considering how peculiar a 21mm lug width is. You want it to have a decent bracelet. And this bracelet, if you have any experience with Pagani Design, is a pretty damn good bracelet. Not the best in the world, but amazing for this price. The bracelet starts at 21mm and tapers down to 18mm at that clasp, and raises up again to 19mm along that clasp. Nicely etched into that clasp is Pagani Design, and this watch features the pretty standard Rolex style fold over clasp. Although this one, I must say, is particularly stiff. And because I like to keep my nails short, I've struggled to open it 1 or 2 times. Here we go. Feel like over some time, although this is Jason's watch, it should loosen up. Although on a positive note, it won't accidentally open while you're wearing it. But that being said, it is still a milled machined buckle, which is definitely a plus point for a watch in this price point. The finishing on the bracelet is brushed outer links and polished mid links, and the watch features pushpin sizing. The watch does feature some micro adjust, although I must say it is an absolute faff to get in there. You can only get access to the spring bar on one side, and because it's all kind of self-contained, it took me ages to resize this one. Not sure how you rectify that, because I do like the clean look on the side of the clasp, but it just really does take a long time, so that's something to bear in mind. And there you go, there's a look at that pushpin sizing, which again is slightly annoying if you don't have the right tools for the job. This watch also doesn't feature any kind of sweaty day diver's extension, so that's another thing to bear in mind. Since we're around the back, let's have a look at this display case back. And as you can see, it is again a wonderfui decorated Hangzhou movement. Now, of course, there's very little to be said about this movement. The stats are fairly all over the place. Jason recorded it to about 3 seconds a day. I'm getting a very similar reading, but he made a good point that you really, take that with a pinch of salt, because each of these movements comes out the factory different, and there's no guarantee you'll get one anywhere near as accurate as this one. So I think he just got lucky. So that's something to bear in mind. I've just remembered I've forgotten about the mailed end links. Now, this is usually a gripe, but somehow Pagani have managed to curve these down so they actually conform to your wrist a lot better than usual. Let me pop it on the wrist and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And here it is. Now, for a 41mm watch with a 13mm height and male end links, it does actually wear surprisingly well. Now, I have slightly larger than average 7.5-inch wrists, but those dimensions I typically wouldn't attribute to a kind of dressy watch. But actually, for a guy who likes a slightly bigger watch on their wrist, this one does wear particularly well. And to be honest, the kind of guy that's wearing a watch like this wants to be noticed. So the bigger real estate, the bigger polished bezel, bracelet, case, and of course that massive eye-catching open heart, I feel like this piece actually works. Another aspect of this watch that I really like is the way that it tapers down from the head of the watch through the bracelet here and to that clasp. The matched polishing and brushing, I don't know, the finishing on this watch is, to be honest, quite astounding. Now that's not Pagani. I just think that the way that this whole thing kind of comes together is actually really quite flattering in a way that I just didn't expect to be impressed with this kind of watch. Now, if you've watched one of my episodes before in my full review, I do like to go through a couple reasons not to buy a watch, because that, at the end of the day, is what I think people looking for reviews are ultimately looking for. Now, let's start with this crown. To start off with, I just want to say this crown is threaded incredibly nicely, but once you've got it unthreaded, the manual winding here is incredibly gritty. Now, so much so that, because this isn't my watch, I really refrained from manually winding it at all during the time that I've had it, because it just doesn't feel right, and it's incredibly loud. It sounds like you're winding up one of those little clockwork toy cars that I used to have when I was a kid, so I've been shaking it, giving it the old Seiko shuffle, like my Seiko 5s, so it's just something to bear in mind. I think it might just be this movement in particular. I'm not used to it, and it is quite jarring when you first try it out, and I'm sure over time that will wear down the cogs and movement inside it, because there's definitely some resistance there. And this motion over time could possibly affect the longevity of the movement inside. The movement also has another issue, is it adds quite a considerable thickness at the cost of that open heart. This is definitely a matter of preference, but I would definitely prefer a thinner Milgauss Homage or Oyster Perpetual Homage and do without that open heart complication. The third issue is in on this dial, and it is of course a QC issue. It was always going to happen at a Pagani design at this price point, and that is that these applied indices are ever so minutely a little too far to the right. Now, that could be because the printed minute track is ever so slightly to the left, or the indices are ever so slightly to the right, but it's something that sticks out, and most people won't notice it. I definitely don't notice it unless I'm like doing these crazy inspections just for your guys' sake, but yeah, it's just something to point out. Another thing I've noticed is that the open heart has a little arrow on it that is kind of imitating a seconds hand, and it's very peculiar when you have the lightning bolt seconds hand of the Milgauss. I think they just could have done without one or the other. My personal preference would be to snip off that little arrow hand on the open heart, make it look a little more like a tourbillon, which is the look they're going for. Make it a little more decorative, which at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is. I mean, no one's looking at that open heart and actually reading the running seconds from there. Well, that concludes my review of this Pagani design, Label Noir Homage. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you guys think of open hearts? Oh, and before I forget, I am doing a giveaway because I've hit 500 subscribers. Thank you guys so much. I'll leave a link up here in the top corner and also in the description below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!